I am excited to introduce you guys to an expert in diversity and inclusion, Dr. Tiffany Bowden. Why don't you introduce yourself, Tiffany?
Hi guys, nice to meet you. I'm so happy to be on and so excited to meet all of you guys virtually. I'm Dr. Tiffany Bowden, I was mentioned. And, I've been in the cannabis industry since about 2011. And I started out with Comfy Tree Enterprises, which was a traveling cannabis education company. It was the first Black-owned company in that kind of a space. And I also am the co-founder of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. No longer associated with either of those organizations. However, right now I'm committing most of my time to doing diversity and inclusion trainings, as well as helping social equity applicants. I'm a TEDx speaker, and that's ultimately what I've been doing kind of for the last 3 years. But I'm happy to be here.
Yay, nice. Thank you. So we were talking last week, and you were telling me that before you were born, your dad was a pro football player for the Green Bay Packers. Do you think that that was an influence in your life?
Well, certainly, my dad was an influence in my life in general. He was my coach for everything. I'm an athlete as well, or at least I used to be, and he was definitely the coach for everything. So he definitely taught me the whole keep your eye on the prize piece. But he also was part of the reason that I came into the industry, in that I really sought this space out because I wanted to open it up for people like him who could have benefited from cannabis as medicine, because ultimately he passed away of kidney failure and terminal illness. And his care at the end of his life was very much about opioids, and that had its own kind of impacts. And so you have multiple breathing processes as you see how these medications impact people. So I got the passion from that also.
Yeah, we're going to get to more of that soon. Back to your dad and you and he being an athlete, you're super, super motivated person. I mean, you have a BA, you've got a master's degree, you've got a PhD. Do you think that that motivation came from his and your athleticism? And how did you fit all of that stuff into your life? You're a young woman.
Yeah, my whole family actually values education. Both of my grandparents graduated from college. Both of my parents graduated from college. So within African American community, that's actually rare, just because of societal conditions, and historically, people weren't allowed to be able to get certain kinds of schooling or have the means. In my case, I was very blessed, and we very much value that within our space. I was always encouraged. I've had a massive supportive village that has helped raise me. Where the athletics comes in is more about that inner athlete drive. And, I've learned much more even about like being down in a game than I have being up. And so that kind of helps to fuel me when you hit turbulence in a business space as well. And if you're constantly working within your why, working within your passion, willing to shoot the shot and not let the ball just kind of sit in your hands, you'd be amazed at how much can go through the net. So that's kind of where, I came from.
I'm sorry about that. I thought I had my phone off.
Okay.
So, I love that talk about the why. I love that. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because it's so important. Sometimes we just go and we just do things, and we forget to really sit down and think about the why. What is your why?
I think that it's really important to understand that why, because that's also going to help you to figure out what kind of business you need to turn down, right? And when you're in the cannabis industry, there's so many opportunities in the space, and you can very quickly get caught up in the what you're doing. And you can get very quickly caught up in people who say that they're trying to do the same things that you're trying to do. But if you don't really align on the why, then the what's and the hows are also going to start to show some fragmentation. And that is probably one of my earlier entrepreneurial mistakes that I made, is that I didn't align on those levels with people who shared my why. I'm a very selfless person. What drives me is helping the least of these, like people who, need someone to be a stand for them. I'm also very passionate about connection and healing. Those are the spaces that I am really strong in. So I'm in an each one, teach one, unifying kind of modality. So within that, even though I have that natural kind of instincts as a competitor and from like as an athlete, I have always been more so in competition with myself. I don't compete against other people. If I am constantly pushing myself to be my greatest version of myself, then naturally, the points just kind of take care of themselves. And so I kind of take that with me within any space. So I am not a competitor against other women. I'm not a competitor against, other minorities. I believe in abundance, and I believe that there's enough room for everybody to win. So I'm somebody who's going to more so pour out of myself and pull other people up as I climb. And, that just creates more opportunity for everybody, and we all win.
That's awesome. I love your why. Let's talk about your dad getting sick. You told me some interesting things, and I wanted to come from you, but uh, that's how you had that aha moment about cannabis. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, actually, so my dad was kind of secretly using cannabis to help with his end of life care. He was on the opioids before, but the way that opioids kind of work is that your body adjusts to them, and so you need more and more and more of them, and the doctors can't really titrate the dose out in a healthy way long term. And so he hit that upper limit, but he still needed, medications. And, at that point, he decided to kind of work with, he had a dialysis buddy who had some cannabis that he was able to use. And my reaction initially was not a very positive one because I was not informed about cannabis in terms of its medical benefits. I grew up under a lot of propaganda and in conservative environments. And so because of that, my reaction was like very fearful. I was concerned as to like what might happen to my dad. I was concerned about where he was getting stuff from. There was a lot of like irrational fears that I had, which I got honestly. But then once I was able to kind of see how it worked for him and was able to see him kind of coming off of his off of the opioids and such, I was able to get more of my dad back, and you can't argue with the scene experience and the evidence that's like presented in front of you. And so after he passed away, I just decided that I was going to dedicate the space of my work, like which at that time I was in a PhD program, decided I was going to focus on trying to understand why I had such a negative reaction. Why was I so misinformed when it was such a powerful plant and there was such a powerful experience with it? So with that, I was able to do some research on the propaganda that kind of helped shape it, shape the perception around cannabis, and was able to look at the correspondences between Anslinger and John Adams and, Elijah Adams. So, I was able to really get my perspective altered. And that's kind of how I ultimately came into the space.
How do you think that propaganda has stood up for all of these years, and with all of the anecdotal evidence that we have out, how is it still, even in 2020, still such a thing?
A good question. I mean, the thing is that when all of this was kind of moving forward, we didn't really have the highly structured media that we have now. We had a lot of reliance on word of mouth and, authoritarian bias and such. It's not entirely different than kind of how it is now. The difference is now is that we have more access to the truth by way of the internet, as well as a decentralization of media. So, we have more people that are out and willing to tell the truth, and it's able to be verified a lot faster. So that's allowed for things to spread a lot faster, and people are able to see the inconsistencies and see that it's not the right question to ask about should we legalize. The better question is like, why was it criminalized in the first place? And when we ask that question, then we start to reveal the inconsistencies very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have family members that are still buying into that propaganda, so, and it boggles my mind. Oh, you know what? I forgot. We didn't finish your dad's stuff. You told me an interesting thing that he used medical maggots. That was
Oh, yeah.
interesting to me.
Yeah. So, my dad is also kind of the way that I got introduced to naturopathic medicine in a way, in that my dad was, he was in the hospital and he was about to have to get his legs amputated. And there was a naturopathic doctor that walked in and she said, "Hey, don't sign that. Whatever you do, don't sign that. Like, worst case scenario, I'll bring you back and then they'll just go ahead and amputate. But, if I can help, then ultimately I'll be able to help save your legs." And what she did is she got medical maggots, and the maggots were able to go to work on his legs, and they were able to eat all the decay and the gangrene that was eating up his legs and, like, creating those ulcers on his legs. And it cleaned the wound better than any trained surgeon could ever possibly do. But they were, yeah, medical maggots. So natural medicine is like so important, and we need to make sure that we have balanced conversations about these things, because Western medicine and traditional science has been dominating the narrative, but it doesn't necessarily own the monopoly on healing space.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I'd never heard of that. That's wild. There's so much that we need to learn about. There's so many things.
Absolutely.
We need to take more ownership of our medical care, of our health. Well, too many of us just were like, whatever the doctor says, and doctors don't know.
Well, health is wealth, and they only know what they're trained in.
Yeah.
Yeah. My doctor, I just started going to the doctor. I just got insurance 2 years ago. I raised 3 kids with no health insurance. And I just recently got health insurance, and I was talking to my doctor. He wanted to get me right onto these cholesterol drugs. And I was like, what are the side effects to that? And he said, oh, there aren't any. And I said, all pharmaceutical drugs have side effects. What are they? And he said, we give these to tens of thousands of people, and I've never heard of anything. And I was like, well, tell me what you know about the endocannabinoid system. And he said, what is that?
Yeah, see, and a lot of them, they don't really learn about the endocannabinoid system. So it's really just about like what they teach you in school. It's not much different from any other, curriculum that we have in our school systems. Like, if you think about even history, there are some schools that teach history in one particular way. There's others that teach in another way. And then that's why we end up having these conversations like we live in multiple countries within one country, because it's all about what you're presented on a consistent basis, and then you get socialized through that program. It's the same thing with our media. You have ways that you can live in a homogenous kind of media ecoculture, and if you are only listening to conservative media, or if you're only listening to liberal media, and you don't have any kind of an understanding of what's going on in the conversation beyond that, you can literally live in an entirely different existence and be shut out from anything else. And that's the way also that our, medical professionals are trained, is that they get a very specific paradigm of education.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more true every single day. And I don't know how we fix that. I really don't.
Well, I think that the doctors are starting to come over into the natural space in terms of cannabis for one reason or another. Some of them it's because of money. We'll take it, I guess, but as they get more education, then they'll help to kind of spread that to their peers. We have more young people who are interested in getting this education. And as these schools get pressure, especially for funding, then they'll open up these things at a minimum because of those reasons. We can hope for more altruistic reasons, but in our country, money talks, And I think that as things kind of evolve, they're going to start to see that, not only is cannabis good for people, but it's also, good for their businesses to be able to help educate people about the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking about education, like I mentioned, you're a highly educated person. What do you think is the most important thing that education has given you in your life?
You know what? I'll say this. I'm kind of a contradiction in that, like, I think that the best education that you can get is not inside of these institutions. I think that, the School of Hard Knocks and lived experience, runs circles around anything that they would teach you in these ivory towers, I was fortunately put on pathways to be able to do this. And I would say that the best thing that I've learned from that has been resilience. It doesn't have really anything to do even with the academics of it all, but it takes a lot to be able to get through all of that. Because my PhD, it wasn't like, it wasn't a very easy journey. I'll just say some of the highlights are that, after I got there, I want to say my first day of graduate school, my grandfather passed away. My second year in, my father passed away. And then I was going to come back the following year, and then my significant other got killed in a hit and run car accident. So I said, okay, I'm going to take a sabbatical. Then I met another gentleman while I was in my healing journey and trying to kind of rebound off of that. And then I was like, from that space that I was going to be working on my body and my healing space, and then wanted to build a business out of that. That's ultimately where I built my first business out of, and also why it was a very unstable partnership, because when you don't heal that unresolved grief, it can cause you to put yourself in some very compromised situations. And so I didn't have the proper, vetting, if you will, for partnerships. So that's kind of how, what was at the foundation for that. Then ultimately, when I went back to the school, my professors had a mass exit from the university. So I had to cultivate whole new relationships. Once I was able to do that, I had an advisor that moved and left the school. And then once I had gotten through that, the partnership that I'm referring to, which was basically an abusive relationship, he decided that he wanted to extort me and hijack my research drive and keep that held hostage so that I would turn over my business assets so that he can steal my company. And so then I had to start my whole PhD process over again. I had to take my qualifying exam with vertigo. I had no research because he wouldn't give it to me. I passed that. And then I ultimately finished my dissertation during coronavirus, had no access to the library because I couldn't at that particular point, get access because they were saying that I owed them, some money because of whatever the situation was, even though I had a full ride. It was just some crazy entangled situation. But all of that, and then I finally got to the part where it's okay, you're actually finished. I defended and I was able to move through it. I'm now Dr. Bowden. And really in terms of all the things that I learned within that journey, it wasn't, I can't really point to any particular academic lesson that has been more beneficial for me than being able to look at myself and say that I did it, that I was able to get through all of that adversity and at the end of it, come out strong. I learned certainly a whole lot more in going through my trials and tribulations and being in the cannabis industry, and showing up as I did, very open heart, very in my feminine energy, if you will. And I had to learn how to hold, not only my feminine energy, but some of that masculine energy as well, which is about your boundary setting, which is about that driving energy and all that. I had to really develop some of those things while I was in the space, because I attracted a lot of predator energy, because I just I didn't have an awareness of it. I have not been brought up around men who were super greedy and off balanced and willing to put me in harm's way. I've had nothing but kind and loving men. So misogyny was completely foreign to me. I had to learn about what that was firsthand. Whereas I thought that racism might be a situation that I might encounter, it was actually the sexism that was really kind of devastating to get to know what that was. So there are so many lessons that I could point to that happened completely outside of my academic journey that added color to the exclamation point that I finished my PhD.
Yeah, we're gonna get right back to that, but right now it's 420. So
Mm-hmm.
let's celebrate 420 if you have anything handy. Come on. Smoke. We've got a perfectly legal smoking lounge here.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, so hold please. So there are a lot of bad marriages in the cannabis industry, and you're just sharing some of what happened to you. What can you share with us? What can you teach us that you learned so that we don't have to learn what you learned?
Oh God, so many things. The first thing, of course, is to connect with someone that shares your why. The second is, really, really evaluate whether or not you want to start business with friends and family. It seems like a good idea at the time, but what happens is that you kind of rush in, and then you learn different things about each other that, the stress and tension of entrepreneurship, especially in this space, doesn't really show you until it's there. People change when money hits the table, and it can be a major blow to lose a highly valued relationship to those types of things. So I actually generally recommend people not starting businesses in the cannabis industry with people that are there, like highly prized relationships and intimate relationships, because it can tear them to pieces, and that can destabilize you within the rest of your life. Another thing would be to know your worth and know your power. You really have to do inner work. I have a course that I'm launching called Business Self-Defense. And it's as much about law and business as it is about personal development. And I say that because really all the things that I did have as issues in myself, those things all showed up in the business, but I wouldn't have known that if I didn't do that work. So what does that look like? If you have issues within your self-worth, where you have issues of seeing yourself as valuable, then you're probably going to struggle asking people for money. You're going to struggle with pricing yourself as high as you should. If you are somebody who is codependent, you're probably going to think that you need a partner to do things when you can really do it by yourself. If you're somebody who has issues with, protecting yourself and thinking about yourself like you're too selfless, then you're going to be the person who's operating agreements and, things that actually would protect you. Those things are going to be in shambles if you have them at all, because you're going to be so busy thinking about what other people need and want that you're not going to protect your own house. So there's all of these things that can kind of come up. That you really, really, really have to do that work. And you also want to give yourself some compassion and an exit plan. So thinking about what could be the most graceful exit, thinking about the end before you even begin. Like if you decide that you're going to do something with someone, okay, what is the exit plan? Like if something goes wrong, how do we want to peacefully dissolve? And make sure that that is written down. That's like very important. And, if possible, I recommend people not even, starting off with partners and other people until you can really kind of get into your lane and you have some strength. Because if you come in underfunded and then you partner with somebody who is able to wield more power over you, it can be a very messy situation, very, very quickly. And there's so many things that you don't know. And then you'll have to learn them kind of firsthand, and you can leave yourself vulnerable. So those are just some of them, some of the lessons that I can give.
That's really interesting, and I never thought of an exit plan. If I don't know why, I just never thought of an exit plan that you have for when things go wrong. I thought it was just like, how am I going to wrap this up and make money, or go on to the next thing or retire or whatever.
It's kind of like the way that people think about life is also how they think about business, in a sense. Like a lot of people, they don't have wills, they don't have end of life directives, they don't have their estate or house in order. You don't really think about that there is going to be an end, definitely, or in one way or another, whether that means that the business is going to fail, the business is going to get sold. Maybe you decide that you're not going to work it and you're going to pass it on to your children. Something's going to happen. You're not going to be around forever,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same kind of mentality. If you can come to peace and come to grips with the fact that, everything is always in flow and changing, things are impermanent. If you can come to grips with that, then you can start making plans that have some longevity, and that includes ends.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. When I was young, I was working at Harris Ranch Restaurant. It's in the Central Valley, and this guy owns all of these cows, all of this land, huge farmer, and he was in his early 70s, and he died in a plane crash and did not have a will. It's like, how you think, how does that happen to people? But it does. So
It absolutely does. And that's kind of one of the really weird fun facts about me is that I'm also a death doula. So a lot of people don't know what a death doula is, right? So like people kind of know what a midwife is, you know, from a birthing standpoint, like people that you might call to your home to help child begin life. I'm a death doula. Like I actually help people die. So like when people are at towards the end of their life, I'm called upon to help support people in that way. I actually am going to be supporting someone later on today that just got pulled off of life support in their in comfort care. This is a space that I've found great passion in because of the amount of death that has surrounded me and the kind of trauma that was present, where it doesn't have to be. And that trauma can come because of a lack of acceptance of the fact that there is going to be an end.
Well, that's really interesting. So, when you experienced the death of your association and your business, how did you feel, and how long did it take you to process that? What was that? What was that experience like? What did you do next?
Oh God, I can't. I wish I could say that I took it gracefully. I did not. Okay, so I went through all the stages of grief. I mean, you know, when you lose a business and you go through something like that, people don't understand that you know, entrepreneurial trauma is real, and you have to grieve the same way that you would grieve, you know, from a death. So I went through the denial period, I went through the anger, I went through all of that, and you know, I finally got to a point of acceptance. But then once I got to the point of acceptance, it was wild because I've been way more successful, you know, post acceptance and just kind of doing my own thing. Uh, than I was when I was like kind of reaming and railing against the whole thing. So it's kind of one of those things that if you come up into a space where you're hit that wall, understand that like failing a business in any way, shape, or form is not the end, and it doesn't mean that you can't, you know, go on. It doesn't mean that you're not a good business person. In my particular case, I was a victim of you know, fraud and all sorts of other kinds of issues, from because of the people that I put in my space. You know, I invited folks to the table and didn't realize that I was on it. I got wiser and I was able to move on. And now I'm able to be an inspiration to other people. I've helped launch other people's businesses. I've gotten a lot of purpose from that. But you know, it's kind of one of those things where you're not going to win them all, you know. And so if you can plan in advance for the fact that, you know, you might fail, and be able to have compassion for that fact, and just be willing to get back up, that's really important. So like in the space that I was kind of going through that, also I will say that there was a lot of silence, right? So I was screaming at the top of my lungs for assistance, but there was a lot of silence. And I had to kind of go back to some of my former athletic days where I was playing, I was playing softball, and my father was my softball coach. And what he used to do is he used to give us what's called a silent inning, which a silent inning is where he's not going to say anything. He's just going to allow us to do our best and see what happens, you know. And when he initially started doing this, it was bad. We would get runs hit on us, people knocking home runs. We don't know what we're supposed to do. Who's on first? Who's on second? Like we don't have any idea what's going on. Okay. And we were just like mad. Like, what are you doing? You are a coach. Like, what's happening? You know? And he was just like, you should know what to do. Like, just
That is
figure it out. You
brilliant.
know, just
That's
figure it out.
brilliant. That's like teaching you to be humble.
That's it. He was teaching us to be humble, but also to, you know, when we hit those moments where we think that we don't have the answer, we probably do. And so, like, you know, it got to the point, like, closer towards the end of the season, like, he would switch up, like, when that silent inning was coming, and he would go silent. And we're just like, dang, okay, we got it, though. We got it. We got it. We know the plays. We know what to do. We know where to do stuff. And we would just all of a sudden like really sink into our internal energy, and we would just have it. We would just have it. And by the end of it, he didn't even say much. Like, I mean, he was silent all the innings, you know, and he was trying to kind of wean us off of him in a way.
Uh,
Um, and so that was kind of part some of what also assisted me in this journey. Is like, okay, yeah, you're gonna hit these moments where it's gonna be silent, you know.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So then what was next for you? And how long did it take you? How long did you spend taking care of yourself and figuring it out?
Well, now I understand that self care is a lifelong journey. You know, I don't any longer do the whole thing where it's like, okay, well now I'm gonna grind and I'm gonna just kill myself and then let me stop and take a self care break. That's self care is a lifestyle, and if you value yourself, if you see yourself as also important, that has to be incorporated into your life. So now I saying no is probably one of the best things you could do from a self-care perspective, like just knowing what business to say no to, what activities you can say no to. And the best way to be able to do that is to understand what your why is, because if it's outside of that pocket, it's not really relevant to your life.
Yeah, I've learned that I can say no, and I can say no without having to explain myself. Sometimes it's just like, well, I have this and that. And no, it's just, no, I don't want to do that.
Exactly, because sometimes it could just be no with a period.
Yeah. Yeah. Want to go on a date? No.
No.
No. Well, actually, yes, just not with you.
Valid.
So tell me, how did you get to be a TED speaker?
That was also like a really interesting thing. I'm trying to think, how did that whole thing happen? They found me, I believe, is how that happened. They reached out to me about something that they had seen online. And then I did my first talk, which was called Beware of Balloons. And Beware of Balloons was actually like part stand up bit and part talk and performance. And so people really loved that. It was about cannabis. It was about the absurdity of our cannabis laws. And the whole premise was like that latex balloons are actually more dangerous than cannabis. So I just did this whole like little stand-up bit. And I got a top 5 People's Choice Award. So then I got invited to do another, in which case I was preparing for that. And then at the last minute, they said that they wanted to change my topic, which is a whole nother kind of weird thing because TED has like a lot of like diversity of thought when it comes to these things, but there's some kind of weirdness that's behind the scenes when it comes to the cannabis thing, where there's some topics that are able to come forward and other things, depending on how you say things, they're not really so, gung-ho. But I had to kind of like pivot on a dime and choose a whole different topic. And that's where my second one came in, which is what my coloring book taught me about racism. And I did that. I was able to use my animated poem, and that one has been what's been getting spread around by everybody recently because of the climate that we're in.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link for that in the chat. And as soon as you can get your hands on the balloon one, the video, I want to see that first of all and send it out to everybody.
Yeah, it would be great if I can get that. I've been asking them myself.
I mean, come on. You're in it. They have to give it to you, right?
You would think.
That's crazy. Okay, so then you went into advertising and drove the time.
Well, I've always been in advertising. I mean, so my bachelor's degree, I have a specialization in advertising management, and I did a lot of intern work in advertising at various different advertising agencies. Was in the AAF, Most Promising Minority. I was in Advertising Age. So that's kind of where the foundation was. I was studying a lot about representation of minorities. And so that's kind of what started everything.
Awesome. I really love that you create empathy in your diversity training. That was, when I read that, I was like, that is brilliant and sustainable, and I just love it. Can you give us a short example of how you do that or explain it?
So the best way that I could explain it is, human beings all have similar values. We all want to be loved. We all want to be protected. We want to have safety. We want to be able to self-actualize, value community. There's certain principles that join us as humans. We don't all have the exact same, but we have very similar drivers, and we can connect on those drivers and how they show up and what they look like and what the barriers are to achieve those things. Those are the things that kind of create the disconnect. And so then that creates an illusion of separateness that I try to help heal. People are tribalistic in nature, meaning that we tend to kind of go into our groups. And so what my job is ultimately to try to help expand people's vision of what that tribe looks like, to include people that don't look like them and people that they didn't think originally shared their same values and principles.
That's great. I love that. So when you were a little girl, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
A cardiologist.
Really?
I was in love with the heart. I was a very heart person. I was like, I want to help fix people's hearts. Well, I'm kind of doing that. I'm not doing it in the way that I thought.
That's funny because that's funny because you gave me a different answer than when we did the pre-interview, but they're connected. You said that you wanted to be happy.
So when people ask me like later in my life in terms of like college and all of that, what did I want to be in terms of choosing my major and all that stuff, it was always, my answer was happy. My earliest like resonance with like, oh, this is a career that I want or whatever. The only thing that popped in my mind was cardiologist. I had no real idea what they really did, but that was the only thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I could do that. So, are you happy?
I am happy. Don't I look happy?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yay.
Yeah, I strive for it.
So, speaking of happiness, in your personal life, right now with COVID, dating is so hard. And then couple that with being a very smart, intelligent, powerful woman. What is that like?
You know, it's very interesting. I think that COVID has a way of revealing a lot of things. Matter of fact, let me see if I might be able to get my guy friend on camera here. Let's see if he'll be willing to make a cameo.
Yes,
Let's
please.
see if I can harass him. One moment.
Okay. All right, smoke break, everybody. What are you guys smoking? Put it in the chat. I am smoking cherry trance that I got. Papa and Barkley brought some plants for the State of Cannabis last November to put on the stage. Cake mix, yay. All the cakes. I saw wedding pie yesterday, and I was wondering, what is a wedding pie? Is that like you throw a pie in the face? I don't know.
Okay. All right, guys, I'm back.
Did you get them? Hi, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we were just talking about dating and coronavirus, and I was saying that, you know, it has a way of being able to stress people out, but also it has a way of showing you who's in your corner too. So Emmanuel has definitely been in my corner as well. Like, I think that a lot of people, when they share close space, it can really start to kind of rip things up, and as well as like the media in terms of how coronavirus is politicized. You can kind of be on different sides of the fence with that. But if you can hold true to, you know, the love that's present, I think that that's ultimately what gets you through. So, but yeah, this is the person that I care about in my life. He's there.
Yay, I love that. Okay, and my last question, and then we'll see if there's any questions in the audience. What do you think is more important for success, hard work or luck?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't necessarily believe so much in luck. I believe more so in manifesting, but I also am very present with the fact that there are systemic issues that make certain things unequal. I also do, however, believe in hard work. So I think it's all very much important. So personal responsibility, as well as structural elements are both very much important. But if I were going to weigh on the side one or another, I would say hardware.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, but it does take both. Kenneth said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's 100% true. Well, thank you so much for allowing us to get to know you a little better. Are there any questions in the audience for the doctor? For the good, here we go. Monika asks, what do you think is the mindset that most needs to be shifted in today's world in service to justice, sustainability, etc.?
That's a really, really great question. I think that the illusion of disconnection is probably one of the biggest threats that we have, and it's one of the things that I deal with in my trainings. As I mentioned, people can go talking to people that think like them, act like them, watch the same media, for the duration of their life, and we end up creating different tribes and factions. And what that ends up creating is division, and it starts to kind of, bust apart the seams. You can't really meet in the middle to create any synergies from that standpoint. And so I think if we can emphasize those points of alignment, our values, where we're out of integrity with our values, then we can get a lot further than kind of striking at each other.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Greg is asking, I had this come up. My mother was in hospice here in Fresno, and she was having a really hard time. She was so angry and violent. And I finally gave her some edibles and it turned her around, but they wouldn't help me get her a doctor's recommendation. So this question is from Greg. He wants to know, have you ever found the need or ways to integrate cannabis into helping people pass on in your death doula role, or do you keep those fields completely separate?
No, yes, I have. And that's one of those things where sometimes that comes up on request. It's really great for pain support, but it's also really great for spiritual awakening too, and getting into a space of acceptance. It's very opening. As we know, cannabis can help lower inhibitions and barriers that we have, and sometimes that is necessary in being able to help move people into that acceptance space with finality. So yes, it is used. It's not necessarily something that's like a very forward thing, like I'm a cannabis-based, whatever. Like it's just something that if it's a tool that makes sense for the time that you use it. It's kind of like if you are a technician, it's like, yeah, I have a hammer. Of course I have a hammer. But I also have a screwdriver. I've also got, a wrench,
A whole toolbox.
A whole toolbox.
That's great. Yeah, in my mom's case, like I said, she got really violent and it totally chilled her out. And the biggest thing was that she was freaking out about her past. Like she thought she was going to hell because of some of the things that she had done. And she was freaking out about the future. And cannabis allowed her to just deal with this moment and be in the moment. And it was great.
Yeah, it's very much like you can't be depressed or anxious if you're in the present moment, so it's very powerful from that standpoint too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, Leslie Fry wants to know, when you work as a death doula, do you have a set operation that you work off of, or is everything free flowing, and what all do you get into?
So that's a good question. So generally, like kind of within the trade, there are certain things that you ultimately do. However, just like with my diversity training work, like you don't bring the exact same thing to every situation because you're dealing with human beings in like unique situations. So I would say that I have never shown up the same way twice, and it's very different when you're dealing in intimate space with people that you know versus people that maybe like bring you on or like hire you, or there's lots of different kinds of factors that can be involved. But that can be, anything from just like caring for the hearts and minds of people. It could be dealing with doctors. It could be dealing with like actual funeral arrangements. Sometimes people just need, someone to listen to, and just to be able to show up. So it just really depends on the situation.
Yeah, that's great.
I've been doing that for like a couple years.
That's just amazing work that you do. I mean, I don't know how you do it. It'd be really, really hard, but it's so great that there's people like you that
Well, it's what it is that I've had a lot of pain around it. And I think that, most healers kind of come from the spaces that they've been deeply traumatized from. And
Yeah.
then they try to provide what they wish that they would have had,
Yeah.
um, and in that regard, like coming through the things that I've come through, and the kinds of pains, and my struggle with loss and finality and all of that, my journey has very much been about coping with loss, whether that's been like entrepreneurial loss and dealing with that, loss of significant others, family members, what have you. I've had to really kind of deal with that, in a very unique way. So all those things have kind of brought color to my journey.
I think that there's a real need for a good book about that.
I have been told multiple times I need to write a book, and so if you guys have suggestions on what to write about, I'm
Just
happy
that.
to turn
Just that. It doesn't have to be that long. You could probably whip it out in a week, but just about getting people through the death of a partner, the death of a family member. From your perspective, I think it'd be really interesting, especially with a little cameo of cannabis.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. That's something to really hold. I will certainly consider that.
Yay. Let me know if
Mhm.
I can help you.
Thank
Um,
you.
Kenneth wants to know how we stay in touch with you. So if you can put your contact info in the chat, that would
Okay.
be amazing.
Yeah.
Mark wants to know, how do you think we can work together to help younger cannabis business become legal? Many people I know want to legalize their products, but it's too difficult for one reason or another.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I would say that it also really kind of depends on what they're trying to accomplish. So when you're talking about young people, um, they're not necessarily going to be able to deal with on-plant operations per se, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be in the space. So I have worked with a lot of college students, as an example, and helped them launch their businesses. So I would love to know more about like what kinds of opportunities they're trying to launch, because I've found that young people have been incredibly successful in being in the space.
Yeah, I agree. Do you want to expand on that, Mark, if you're still here? Um, so Leslie wanted to clarify, do you work with hospice, or you work with
I
hospice?
have worked with hospice, but I do my thing independently.
So I wonder why Fresno had such a problem with cannabis. Is hospice typically funded federally?
Well, it just depends. I mean, the way that they're structured, for every hospital is like quite different. I mean, it really just depends on where the hospital is getting their funding. So it just really depends.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, Fresno itself, I'm not sure what the local politics of Fresno. A lot of times, that has to do with how socially liberal an area is. Because if they're an area that's like anti-THC, which tends to be spaces that are socially conservative,
Yeah.
they might have an issue with that, which tend to be more Republican leaning or conservative spaces. Those spaces sometimes will allow CBD, um, if they're socially conservative, in that regard, but not even all of the time, in any kind of open way. But now, of course, that hemp is legal, we can kind of do a little bit more. But and also, of course, topicals would be helpful, and you can do those types of things too.
Yeah, I mean, it was just such a huge transformation. It was undeniable. I mean, we found a beautiful home for her. There were 6 people in the home. And we thought they were going to kick her out because she was so violent and so out of control. And it was everybody, it was clear. My family, my sister said, I promised Mom that I wouldn't let you give her any marijuana. And I said, I don't care. She needs this. And my sister sat there and, 45 minutes after she ate, it was a Madame Munchie rainbow macaroon. I was like, Mom, this is going to help you. It's going to help you with your pain. It's going to help you be in the here and now. And she grabbed it out of my hand and stuffed it in her mouth. And she goes, give me that damn thing, and ate it. And within 45 minutes, she was laughing. She was present, and, we just continued it from there. And it was clear to her caregivers that cannabis made the difference, but yet they didn't want to help her get a doctor's recommendation.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of movement there in terms of like the dying with dignity and comfort care, palliative care, where people are pushing more for the ability for folks to have that. I think it should be considered throughout the entire lifespan, but if there's going to be any movement, that space is the space that's seeming to get more support because there's more compassion. Unfortunately, it's kind of unfortunate that we have like a lot more compassion towards people at the end of their life than we do like kind of throughout it. And that's kind of even how it is when you think about like, the death penalty, like, right before someone is about to be put to death, they give them, so much empathy and kindness. They get their favorite meal. They're greeted by their first name. They get a lot more consideration. And I just think that we need to have more of that infused in our society in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with us, with our society. When I made a feature film quite a while ago, and we were going through the rating process, and we found out that you can use the word fuck and still get a PG-13 if you say, I'm gonna fuck you up. But if you say, I want to fuck you, then you're gonna get an R. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, well, we have a very weird relationship with sex in our culture. We're much more accustomed to violence than we are sex, which is the complete opposite if you look at like, European spaces.
yeah, the hippies got a lot of things right. Make love, not war. Come on. Okay, so one more. Mark followed up with his question. He said the young entrepreneurs are a couple of bakers trying to sell legal edibles and a few cultivators, one with a few different farms all over California and also topicals.
So it depends on how young, and it also depends on what state and what kind of products, because if you're talking about CBD and hemp and all of that, that's a completely different ball game than if you're talking about on plan, wanting to, do a full-on operation. I do know about some groups that are doing internships if they're of appropriate age. So, okay, everything is with THC. So if it's in everything THC, I do know of some spaces that have internships. So the National Diversity and Inclusion Cannabis Alliance, they do offer internships. It's based in Los Angeles, California. So depending on what age group, if they were interested in learning and getting some of that hands-on experience, that would be a really great place to start because, a lot of it has to do with you don't really know what you don't know. And at least going through some of the internship things, you can get some of that mentorship as well. And when you have that training, maybe in some cases it's better to start off by working for, a bakery or a grow so that you can really develop and hone that skill set. And I've seen people invest in their interns to be able to like start different operations if they show really great promise or put them in charge of their operations or give them equity because, the industry is still very young. It's so much flexibility. So it really kind of just depends on how they want to maneuver that. But certainly there's opportunity and there's time.
Yeah, so the organization she was talking about, you can remember it, it sounds like Indica, right? It's NID, what is it?
NDICA, Indica.
Yeah, and they're also working on expungement. And also, Mark, if they are social equity qualified, if they could be qualified for social equity, that might help with a hand up, but it, you know, varies from city to city, and it's a really difficult process, but I would suggest checking into that organization because they're doing some great things. Absolutely. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much. I love the green room. I've always wanted to be able to, it's my favorite part of doing an event is hanging out in the green room, because that's where the really cool conversations happen, you know, and I love getting to know you better and sharing you with this audience. And I am recording it. It's going to be available. Oh, do they have a website? Indica. Yes, it's.
Yeah, it's theindica.org.
Yep, there you go. All right. And I will also put that in a follow-up email. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, Tiffany.
Yeah. And thank you guys for having me.
Bye.
Bye.